join us, and also, month to month with everything we're doing, I think it's good to have a refresher. This is our 8th meeting, and this group is being convened to proactively align data, policy, practice, and workforce and economic development, and build a community of practice and purpose among organizations and people working in the green economy. JobsFirstNYC is a neutral convener and facilitator to support stakeholders in determining and deciding what a green economy network will be. You all will drive it forward. In our last meeting, we looked at feedback that you all gave to, you and others who might not be on today, gave to a membership feedback form. And we could share that out again. We had 23 responses to that, and you have access to the last participant agenda. It's all of the data from that last meeting is in there, so we'll make sure you get that again. But just some highlights from that, we identified that the majority of people that are working with us in this group are identify as nonprofit workforce development providers and employers that are currently hiring. We are largely serving individuals who are young adults, low income, and many who are justice involved and public housing residents. Our member orgs offer a wide array of education and training, including lots of different certification options. And something of note from the feedback survey anyway, that it looks that we have far lower support or social services across the group. In earlier meetings, participants identified what we can solve for as a partnership, and today we are going to share back a set of goals based on these from the SurveyMonkey responses and what has been elevated to the top 3 goals. This is just a sort of a picture of who filled in the membership survey. Next slide, please. Jobs First has a 5-step process. We've reviewed this in most every meeting, and I'll skip it for today. You can read more about it on our website. But I will note that on the next slide, where we are now, we are in the imagine phase of the process. And today we are going to share back those top 3 goals that were identified in the survey, complete driver diagrams, and develop measurable targets. Next slide. For this meeting, our intended results are for participants to gain an understanding of and consider partnership structures and value. Participants will review survey results and identify top goals, vision, and work groups for the network. Participants will set targets for the top 3 network goals and complete driver diagrams. Next slide. This is where we are in our roadmap, and you'll hear more about that throughout the day. Next slide, please. So for today's agenda, we're going to have a quick discussion on update from Jen Mitchell on the Cleanup Corps, the New York City's Cleanup Corps. My colleague Roman Jackson will describe different partnership models and governance structures so you can imagine what this network, how it's going to take shape. My colleague David Scott will review results of the goals, vision, and work group survey. And then in groups, you will have time to build out strategies to achieve those goals and set targets. And then we'll go over action items and we'll close out the meeting. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is always my chance to test that the participant agenda has full access. If you can, Amanda, drop the, oh great, I see you dropped the link in chat. So if everyone can just click on that and put in chat if you're having any trouble opening the participant agenda, and then go to, you will see, I think it's on the 3rd page or 4th page, what looks like a contact list. And that includes all the people who registered for this meeting. And I want you to just fill in a check-in question so that we know that you are able to access and type in the document. You'll see, find your name. If you don't see your name, then find a blank row and put in your name. And in the last column, if you could answer the question or just share something about the current needs of job seekers that data we have looked at together might not tell us. And let's just take a minute to fill that in. Bless you.
Thank you.
Great. I see lots of cursors in there and typing, so that means everyone has access. And thank you for filling it in and adding your names. Okay, and while you maybe continue filling that in, I'm going to invite Jen to unmute and speak to give an update on the cleanup and climate course.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I just want to make sure everyone can hear me fine. Can I get a thumbs up? Can you hear me? Great. So this morning, we want to take a few minutes before we really jump into kind of the work that we're scheduled for today to just have a discussion because, the past two meetings, I'm like seeing my face really big right now. Gathering mode, that was scary. The past two meetings, we've had folks from the city, and some are here today, talk to us about the cleanup core, and it was full of opportunity and full of hope, and we didn't want to lose this thread because I think each of us have probably in our own way continued to hear more about the cleanup core and the potential climate core that's coming on. And so I wanted to kind of just briefly run through what we had learned over the past two meetings, and then where I knew things stood today from conversations I've had with folks in the city. Part of why we're doing this is when we think about goals for the Green Economy Network, it's about building trust. It's about having a rapport amongst each other. It's about building relationships where we're sharing with each other information, good news, bad news, commiserating when things are hard, celebrating when things go well, and Green City Force and non-traditional employment opportunities for women and hope. As the founding members of this with Jobs First, we have, over time developed that kind of relationship, and we want to make sure we're nurturing and cultivating that here. And so I thought cleanup core and some of the experiences people had would be a good way to kind of build that transparency and share information. And so as you heard from Michaela and other folks at the city in early April, so almost exactly 2 months from 2 months ago, Mayor de Blasio announced that they were rolling out the cleanup core. It was going to be 10,000 jobs across the city, mainly focused in beautifying and cleaning up 33 of kind of what he was deeming the hardest hit neighborhoods in the city. And it was going to be offering stipends or wages of $15 an hour for anyone interested. And when I announced it in early April, I think it was that 500 jobs were going to be posted on a website. If you look as of this morning, there's probably over 1,000 jobs posted. They're posted through EDC and the Doe Fund, who are on this call today. They're posted through the Horticultural Society. They're posted through NYCHA. They're posted through the Parks Department. So lots of cleanup jobs posted throughout the city. I think some of us over the past two meetings also were given the impression or left with the impression that if any of us were wanted to get involved in that cleanup core, it would be easy to do and straightforward and not a big deal. And I know from conversations I've had with people who are on this call and people who are not on this call, some people are still navigating the process. Some people it was really easy and straightforward, and they got a contract that they already had with the city amended so that they're part of the cleanup core. And then for others, it turned out to be like it didn't really make sense with the contracts that they had and the either the state of the contract or the agency the contract sat in. And so I just wanted to create an opportunity here for people to either ask questions if they had questions, share experiences they had if they had experiences, and then also to note that even if you haven't gotten directly involved in the cleanup corps in some way, shape, or form, one way to get involved is there are, and we can put, actually, I'll put it in the chat when I finish talking. There's a website that you can go to. I think it's like nyc.gov cleanup corps or CC. I'll find it right after, where your participants can, as a post-program activity, apply for any of these jobs. And they are jobs that have, I think, 6-month guarantees. And so there are opportunities, especially for people who are young and looking for kind of a job to get their career started. There's lots of opportunities like that. And so, I think someone just put it in, maybe. Thank you, David. I think you just put it in. So just wanted to open up to, has anyone else had experiences or have questions or keep hearing the term cleanup corps in the air, but want to know more about it? Do I see Kristen? Oh, I thought, Kristen, you were raising your hand. Anyone have any experiences they want to share? And I think I saw Jennifer Dillon from the DOFA was on this. And not to put you on the spot, but if you are
Not to put me on the spot, but to put me on the spot. Got it.
So just, I was wondering, like, because I know that at one point you all were looking to hire from lots of our programs. Are you still in kind of like a hiring spree for cleanup corps? Is there anything people should know?
Yeah, I mean, so for us, it was an easier lift than for others because we already had contracts with the city and their whole history of having the community improvement project. So that was an easier, I think, inroad. But yeah, we are actively recruiting from any CBO, you know, like all of our partners, all of our friends, like in the, you know, in our community to help fill those positions. So that's another way for everybody on this call, if they want to access that to, you know, for their clients and for, you know, anybody that you're serving, is to, you know, to reach out to us and we'll connect you 100%.
Great, thank you. If you want to put where people should reach out in the chat, feel free.
Yeah.
And then I saw Marjorie asked in the chat, are there plans to make some of these permanent positions? I think that your positions at the DOE are permanent. Jen, is that correct? And then
no, we have two different things going on. We have got EDC stuff that is permanent. Those are jobs that we're also filling because there's a program there that's scaling up. But the city, the CCC stuff is the 6 months that you framed, and sort of without funding, you know, like those jobs will phase out at that point. So for us, they're, you know, good jobs for people who are looking for additional work or are in a holding pattern, maybe because they're doing a training program or they're waiting for a job to come through, you know, like those people, you know, like, or starting their careers, as you pointed out. But no, the city core jobs are, as far as I know, temporary.
Yeah. And Marjorie, the thing I would add to that I've heard is that they're all through December, because there's going to be obviously a new mayoral administration coming in. And so there becomes questions of like, what's the sustainability of cleanup corps in the long run? And I think that's probably somebody else's call.
It seems to me that, Jen, that the opportunity here to turn this into more of a paid service model, because the work itself is not going to go away. Like, if it will still be there even when you close the corp down. Like, who picks up from where they left off, right? If you see it as a valuable work now that should be paid for, it's work that was there before and still will need to be done afterwards. So even if it could be converted to some types of service model, paid service model, where people can do 6 months, you know, turn in each time, it would be great to really expand how people access opportunities to gain work experience in different ways, which is missing, right, in the marketplace. And the market itself is coming back, but not at the pace that we it's even being projected that it will come back, and the jobs are going to be different anyway.
Yeah, and I think what heartens the folks on this call, or at least heartened me in the previous conversations we've had about it, is the cleanup core is like the most basic. It's like the city paying $15 an hour wages for people to do cleanup work, but there are at least discussions in place right now for a core that is more geared toward green jobs specifically, and integrates both work and training, which resonates with many of our models and what the Green Economy Network as a group has thought about as a way forward and a path of career sustainability.
I do wonder too, Jen, I had this other conversation about how to possibly pay for some of these things, and we were wondering if the city could take 1% of sales tax towards projects like these, so that they're always standing. The size may vary from year to year based on what that 1% is, but there's always a baseline amount that goes towards projects like this that's year round and continuous.
Yeah, I think that my understanding is, and there's probably folks from the city on here that might know better, my understanding is this first wave is going to be paid for by federal stimulus dollars. But if this proves to be a successful model, then I think people will have to get creative and innovative about how it's kept sustainable and how it's paid for. And there's lots of things to explore in that light. Anyone have any other experiences or anything? I realize my 10 minutes is up. And so if anyone has any last thoughts or questions on Cleanup Core, happy to engage, but also want to keep the agenda moving. All right. On that note, then I'm going to turn it over to Roman Jackson to move us forward in the agenda. And if people do have questions or want to engage further, feel free to shoot me an email or put something in the chat. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Jen. And hi, everyone. It's glad to be with you all today. And I'm just going to quickly share my screen so I can present my slides to you all. All right, can everyone see the screen now? Thumbs up, awesome. Well, good morning. It's great to see so many familiar faces, and I'm glad to present to you all today on building partnerships. Developing partnerships is a journey, and on this slide, you can see the journey that the collaborative has been through thus far in developing the Green Economy Network. We have completed the investigative stage and now are embarking on an imagine process where we set up a formal structure around the partnership. Here are 3 models that are common in developing a partnership structure. The steering committee design is the most common in our partnerships. In this model, there are a small group of partners that manage the day-to-day operations of the partnership and meets with a larger group every once in a while for feedback. This model also seeks to develop a systems change strategy. The second model, which is the full democracy, is set up with all partners involved in the operations of the network, and decisions are made by a full group. And then the third model, the one-to-many delivery model, has one lead agency who manages the relationship with key stakeholders. This model is focused on program design and operations and less focused on change within a partnership or a structure or a sector. Although the steering committee models are most popular, we have all 3 models implemented across all of our place-based partnerships. Given the nature of our work, the solutions we are working on will never look the same. It's our process, built and refined over the last decade, that remains consistent and allows us to achieve measurable impact. And so here's an example of a governance structure from the Jerome Avenue Revitalization Collaborative, which just launched in February 2021. They have a circular leadership model where each organization is involved in the operations of the partnership and roles are assigned based off of skills and capacity. This collaborative has embarked on a three-pronged strategy to ensure that the Jerome Avenue corridor rezoning efforts leads to inclusive economic growth and sustainability for local residents, business, and workers impacted by the Jerome Avenue rezoning. This includes, one, an employer-facing network that will provide residents with direct referrals to jobs available through the JARC agreements with real estate developers, employers, and other partners. Two, a virtual and brick and mortar business hub that will provide local business owners and employers with access to business development resources made available through JARC's agreements with city agencies and other partners. And three, connecting low-income residents to grants and financial supports to pay for educational and workforce development trainings that would otherwise not be able to afford. They have also set up working groups that will help achieve these goals they set for themselves in the imagined stage of our process. An ad hoc committee was also created later on to address the emerging needs of the community. I will now open it up to questions. I know I went a little bit fast there, but really we're just doing this, going through this model because you're all building a partnership for the Green Network. And we are pretty much getting to that stage where you all now have to like really make certain decisions on how you would like the structure, how would you like to come together as a structure, how would you like to make decisions, and like what are some of the key priorities. Can I now open it up to any questions that anyone might have? And if you have a question, just feel free to like raise your hand and I can call on you or write the question in the chat.
I have a question. I don't know if it's for you necessarily, Roman, but I know Gaspar and Brian are both on the call. And just wondering how Lesson and Staten Island networks determine their governance structure.
You want to go first, Gaspar? You want me to go?
I can go first. Yeah, thank you, Jennifer, for the opportunity even to contribute to this section of the agenda. Yeah, so I'm the partnership director for the Lower East Side Employment Network, and we're a group of 9 social service organizations in Lower Manhattan that do provide workforce development. And, you know, we have taken a very purposeful approach to trying to attach workforce development to economic development. And our governance structure, there was none at first, really, other than just like a commitment to participate. But a few years ago, back in 2016, we did do a strategic review, and we set up a tiered structure to have the different organizations represented in different tiers based on their capacity to fulfill on workforce development initiatives, projects, hiring, et cetera. So our 3 tiers are support partners, which right now is only the community board of our district, referral partners who don't operate existing workforce development programs, but may have in the past, and are, you know, very much set up to provide a funnel of new talent to the other programs that do provide services. And then in the third top tier, there are those workforce partners who run the employment service programs on the ground with a full team of employment coordinators, job coaches, job developers, et cetera. And accordingly, each tier, you know, is allocated some amount of money to contribute to the sweat equity of the work they do. All do have representative votes and representative executives on the executive committee. So there really is shared decision making, but we have a central team that consists of an executive chair, an operations chair, and the partnership director, myself. And we kind of serve as the initiators to decision making and bringing proposals and suggestions to the executive committee before anything major happens. So I think that is a pretty decent general overview of our governance structure. There is a lot more behind it with what we call roles and responsibilities. We have formal memorandum of understanding based on the different tiers that an organization might sit in. And also review protocols based on performance, things like that. So it really has become much more formal in the last 5 years.
Yeah, thanks, Gaspar. And just to kind of like go through the partnership models, even though I don't think any partnership exactly looks like one of these models defined, but like, would you say that that the lesson model is closely reflective of the steering committee design than the other two?
In the beginning, we were very much the hub and spoke approach, with the center circle being kind of like the core central team of operators, myself, our program assistant, and the executive chair. However, that circle, as far as volume, is much smaller than the outer ones. It would actually be, the size would be reversed. It would be a little circle in the middle and really big ones in the ring around it. But now we're maybe a little bit more towards the inner and outer rings, but with multiple rings in concentric circles, with also elements of the full democracy. So there's definitely components of each one that I'd say have criteria that match with what lesson consists of.
So thank you so much, Gaspar. Now I want to just quickly give Brian an opportunity to talk about youth wins and their structure.
So much like Gaspar had said, it has evolved over time. I would say originally it was trying to go into a democracy, but what we realized is that you don't always have the same people at the table. So it was very hard to kind of get things done. So we moved more to a hub and spoke. From the hub and spoke, now we've kind of moved more to the inner rings and the outer rings. So in the beginning, we literally just had everybody voting on everything. And then after a while, we realized it was like Hunger Games. So we decided that the best thing to do was to create a model where we had an executive committee that could then work inside of the steering committee. And the steering committee could then have other committees that were associated with it. I would say right now, what we kind of look like is a little bit of a mixture, because even as you develop these over time, the people who are on the committees change. And sometimes what you have happening is one part of the steering committee will not be as productive as another part. So what you find is that the power dynamics between them are ever evolving. I think where lesson youth wins are at different ends of the spectrum is that Gaspar sits in the middle. Youth wins has just recently been able to put a person on that sits in the middle, similar to Gaspar's role, but not in the same exact way. And that's bringing a little bit more cohesion so that we can actually make sure that everything is happening on those different levels and then coming together. But I'm sure that everyone's heard and everyone agrees. Partnerships are hard, and it is something that you have to revisit, much like Gaspar had alluded to, every couple of years and figure out, is this model the best model?
Thank you, Gaspar and Brian, for sharing. And yeah, as they both noted, building partnerships is hard, and sometimes these arrangements change based off of like who comes into the partnership and leaves the partnership, and also just like what are the emerging needs that the community is experiencing. And I think that's really JobsFirst's role, really just to help partnerships to really get through the ebbs and flows. Like you're going to have years where things are going very well and it's working like clockwork, but then you're going to have other years where you come across challenges, whether it be because of like transitions within the partnerships and organizational members itself, or just emerging needs that come up in the community. And so what you all will be tasked to do today, and my colleague Dave Stott will come on in a second to kind of walk you through the process, but really just determining what is the right partnership model for the Green Sector Network. Thank you all. It was great to present you all. And now I want to pass it off to David Scott, who's the manager of Work Solutions and the newest member of the JobsFirst team. David?
Thanks, Roman. Good afternoon, everyone. Pardon for not being on video. I don't have the the best Wi-Fi connection at the moment. So for the moment, we want to start by looking at some of the feedback that we got, looking at the goals that the Green Economy Network could or should prioritize moving forward. This is not to say that any of these goals are things that we would back burner. Simply, there's so much that we're trying to work on and figuring out what is most important to get done now, especially in light of what others have mentioned with elections upcoming and trying to make sure that we present a unified message to the incoming administration. So we're going to go relatively quickly through the feedback on some of these goals, but that said, I want to make sure that while I'm talking about the responses on this, if anyone has any questions, any comments, especially if we highlight anything that someone in particular who's here today wrote, wants to give feedback on, feel free to interject, because really this is supposed to reflect what the group has said about these goals, but also taking that feedback to develop new information about how we can refine these current goals. And then once we refine the goals, of course, deciding what we will actually do, because most of them have to do with define X, standardize Y, something to that effect. So we can start with the first one. And to be clear, the goals that we're going to be looking at are not in, most of you took the survey. These are not in the order of the goal questions in the survey. Most of these are in the order of how highly they were prioritized based upon responses. We can go to that first, or to the most highly prioritized goal. So this one was a clear favorite: developing employer partnerships to increase economic opportunity, understand industry priorities and talent needs, and develop customized training. As you can see in this one, in a large percentage of the respondents ranked this number 5, i.e. the highest ranking, for an overall weighted average of 4.46. If we go to the next slide, you will see some of the things that people had to say about this. And again, these are not an entirety of responses, just some of the key responses that people had. And if anyone had one of these responses and feels that they want to especially interject and expound upon what their feelings were on this goal, whether it was a high priority or low priority goal, feel free to interject. I always find it interesting to highlight some of the contrarian views, shall we say, how not just, for instance, is this goal essential, but how can we do more to connect? What are the lasting career paths? How can we use the assets of network members? These additional things of even if we get a goal finalized and unified and we think it's perfect, what is then the next step from that goal, the sub goal, as it were? So we can go ahead to the next goal, unless anyone has any comments or questions at the moment. Advocating for where investments are made for support at the local, state, and federal levels. This goal also ranked quite highly, not as overwhelming as the other one, for a weighted average of 4.2. And some of the feedback on this one was less unified, but again, a lot of interesting responses. We can see some of those on the next slide. Need to know where investment's coming, but need the research and strategy. Without strong and inclusive labor requirements, may be left picking up crumbs. Often interns more money per hour to learn versus flipping hamburgers at McDonald's. So again, thinking about, yes, where are we advocating for those investments and how? And then once we get those investments, what does that actually translate into in terms of the next steps? Establish replicable, scalable paths for individuals to enter quality career paths, including short-term to long-term transition, and to retrain for new career paths, generally or internally within the network hub. Again, this is a quite favorable response to the goal, but less so than the other two for a weighted average of 4 out of 5. And if we look at some of the feedback on the next slide, again, many people found it's important, good way to ensure attention, but of course, the other factors to consider need to map out how all the opportunities fit together. Then we can organize. To bring everyone's assets together is important, but maybe this is a version of companion to number 1. So thinking about which of these goals should be completely standalone, which goals maybe make sense to merge, which goals are sub goals of each other. These are all things that we'll want to discuss and figure out. If we go ahead. Now we're on to the vision statement for the network. Now, of course, we can work on the exact wording of the vision statement. Currently, we're working to build consistent career paths to good jobs with focus and priority on inclusion. In terms of how people, this is not a question of how people prioritize the vision statement. This is a question of how people find it relates to themselves individually or to the work that they're doing. In this case, very favorable response, or very high ranked response, I should say, weighted average of 4.52. If we go to the next slide. And again, I want to highlight the last element there. Someone found that it's missing the green element, suggesting that focus and priority on the green economy and equitable incomes. Someone mentioned how it's important to focus on power and unionization. So again, this vision statement will be something that we continue to tweak, and we can discuss how it can best reflect the goals and ideals of the network. If we move on to the next slide. A few other bits. I especially find interesting to highlight the missing how intersect with existing paths, which is always key to think about. How is the vision that we're doing, the work that we're doing, how does that counteract or work with what others are doing? And how can we make sure that we're maximizing the synergy of what our team and our network is doing? And on the next slide. Now, for this question, we gave people working group points, as we call them, and asked them to distribute these points as they chose among a variety of working groups. And this is, to be clear, not to say that any of these working groups would be more or less important than the others. Rather, this is to find out which working groups people feel they would personally enjoy working with, or feel that is personally important to them in terms of achieving their goals of the network and their own organizations. So the clear winner, and this shouldn't be surprising given the clear winner on goals, the clear winner was employer partnerships, and the number of the working groups more or less tied for second place, which again is good because that means that we have a variety of people who are interested in working in each of these groups, because we can't have all of us in any one group. So it's good that we have a diversity of interest and talent here. If we go to the next
Dave,
slide. Yes.
I just wanted to, I don't know if you have it handy, but for the something other, do you have any notes around what folks thought additional work groups that might be needed? And if you don't have that open, we could share it out after. Don't worry about looking for it.
I'm certain that I have it on one of my many tabs. I don't have it super handy enough to pause things. I will find that tab.
That's
and
fine.
then we can
we
share out. And again,
if
absolutely. And again, if there's anyone who right now wants to jump in because there's some group not mentioned here, or when they were going through the survey thought, wow, there should definitely be some group here that I don't see. If anyone wants to jump in and highlight something that they would like to work on, or that the group in general should be working on, absolutely feel free to jump in. And again, this is right here, just a numerical reflection of what we were just looking at. Again, the employer partnerships and economic opportunities was the clear winner, but none of the options was completely unpopular. And of course, it is always important that we have people who are just like, I want to work on data, or I want to work on the more technical aspects. That always underlies much of the work that we do. If we proceed to the next slide. Again, this is actually the most important part. What this information means to people here in terms of you individually, in terms of the group organizations and institutions with which you're working, and in terms of the Green Economy Network. What can we do to take this information and move forward to actionable steps? Who is looking at this and says, okay, I want to be part of X working group, or I want to lead X working group? Because really having that individual excitement about the subcomponents of this network is what's going to advance the work of the whole. So if there's anyone who right now wants to jump in and say, I think we definitely need to add X working group, or I definitely want to lead or co-lead Y working group, or there's a goal here that we definitely need to prioritize, or a goal that is missing that we definitely need to prioritize, feel free. And if anyone has questions about some of the other goals in the survey, we have all the information on all the responses. We were just highlighting the top 3 most high priority goals per the survey.
I'll say something. What I noticed in the survey that cropped up a couple of times is how we're approaching this from sort of holistic, sort of like social safety net kind of way. Some questions were very geared towards, and the responses ended up saying, you know, we got to get people jobs in the green sector. Now
You are back.
okay, so how much, I'll just try and be short, how much our work includes the safety net of the social safety net, so these jobs are good, equitable, and, you know, long-term, and provide a living wage. So that's my comment. That makes our work a lot more expansive and a lot more difficult, but maybe more important and more in line with everyone's values. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Good.
Questions? Yeah, sorry.
No, I was going to say, if no one else wants to jump in right now, we can proceed on to some of the definitions and then move forward with goals, targets, and drivers.
Sounds good.
So in this section, we want to quickly look at what some participants had talked about in previous discussions. And while some of this might strike a few as more or less semantic, it's more about making sure that when we are discussing our goals, our definitions of good jobs or anything else, that the terminology that we're using internally to define these things is clear, because ultimately, once we internally provide our definitions of what things mean and of what things should be, we're going to then take these to external stakeholders, whether it's policymakers or anyone else. So we want to be clear about our own messaging so that we can be clear with external messaging. And even on just the basic concept of, okay, we are a green economy network. What is a green economy? What does that actually mean? And so these were just some of the excerpts from, and this isn't by no means an exhaustive list, from one of the previous sessions where people were talking about what green economy means. And I won't go reading through each of these, but I think what's clear is that while some of the items are definitely consistent, the word skills is probably mentioned more than any other word. There's a lot of variety in terms of what people are thinking about of what it means, whether it means having career-long ready skills and training, whether it means having skills necessary just to be hired at all, whether it means thinking about more of the needs of employers or more of the needs of individuals. And again, can't have one without the other. Someone importantly mentioned developing curricula early in school. So before many of these individuals might even come across our radar, making sure that the systems are in place, that they are ready for future training and future skills. People were mentioning, the number of people mentioned the importance of having both those hard skills and those soft skills that might fall under more general workplace readiness, workplace etiquette that makes sure that they are ready to be hired quickly and easily by employers. So won't dwell on this one, but if anyone had some key item on what the green economy means that isn't on this list they want to share out now, feel free. Otherwise, we are going to continue gathering those thoughts. So if anyone has anything to share at the moment, now's the time. Okay, then we will move on to the next slide. So this was one of the examples, I think many, if not most of you have seen this one on some of the goals and drivers activities that we did. Now, this is just one of the examples, and this should not be seen as, there is no, with all of these things, there is not a right way. This is just thinking about, okay, if we have a goal in mind, then how can we turn that goal into something that we're looking to actually turn into reality? So we have maybe this just very high level goal of increasing school readiness, and then a few second tier items of parenting, environment, the education systems, those what I call the wraparound services, health systems, medical systems, the things, and we could easily add transportation to this, the things that enable people to do the physically and emotionally do the things that are key to what we're looking to achieve. And then really breaking that into detailed levels of every little item. So whether we're working on the green economy writ large or not, these are things to keep in mind. I think Carrie wanted to add.
Okay, so as we go into breakouts, I just wanted to go over some of the key terms that you'll be thinking about. Again, when you look at the goal, I pre-populated in your worksheets the 3 top goals that we just shared out from the survey. So each of the 3 breakout rooms have one of the top goals. And you're going to be working in a driver diagram. And let's start with goal. It's often used interchangeably with result or outcome to label the idea of a condition of well-being for people or communities. And often it should be measurable and something that is achievable. We're going to talk about kind of transitioning from goals to targets that are actually very measurable, and you can track your progress towards outcomes. But in the driver diagram, the tool that displays the goal along with the primary and secondary drivers connected to achieving the goal. And then after filling out the driver diagrams, we are going to look at that goal and see if we could turn it into the language of a target. And there's a very simple form in each of the breakout rooms activity sheets that have like, it's a kind of like a Mad Libs fill in the blanks of how to turn a goal into a target. So you should be able to work on that. And let me just also define, when you look at the driver diagram, a primary driver is the key area that you need to influence to achieve your goal. Big topics or areas that you need to work on in order to achieve the goal. And a well-written primary driver helps you identify process measures. And then the secondary drivers, these are more solution drivers and will influence the primary drivers. They're what you need to have in place to positively influence the primary drivers to achieve the goal. And well-written secondary drivers help you identify relevant change ideas. So this is all kind of working towards systems change. If you think of the goal as moving the condition, changing the conditions that are holding something in place, and you want to shift that to a better place, this driver is kind of the map to help you do that. So this is just what it looks like. These are the sheets that you're going to have in the room. And I have in here the top goal that Dave shared out earlier. And that goal, we'd like it to be specific and measurable. And that's what you'll do in the target sheet. This is an example of that in context, something very, a simple concept of somebody their goal is to achieve a healthier BMI. So they set that goal as a target to lose 5 pounds in the next 3 months. Primary drivers might be shopping habits, lifestyle, exercise, motivation. And then the secondary drivers, all of your faces are covering my secondary drivers, so I can see them. Secondary drivers, if you think about shopping habits, what might be a way to shift that? Your weekly meal planning, establishing a shopping routine, your lifestyle, stopping drinking during the week or changing your eating habits. Your exercise, what are the things you can do to increase your exercise, and your motivation, what are things you could do to stay motivated and stick to your goal? So that's a very, simple way of thinking. This is obviously not a community change, driver diagram. It's something a little bit more simple. Well, not simple, right? It's not easy to have a healthier BMI. So no, it isn't simple, but it's different than what we're talking about. But I wanted to just contextualize it for you. This is what that target setting worksheet will look like. Like I said, it's really straightforward. There's instructions there. And okay, so it looks pretty good. They're set up. There's a range of people in each, and then I will check if somebody is not assigned. And the rooms are being facilitated by Kathleen, Jen, and Tanya, and they have a co-facilitator in there that will help capture your input. Before we jump in there, does anyone have any kind of big overarching questions about driver diagrams and what we're doing? Okay, I'm going to launch the breakout rooms. Instead of a formal room by room share out, I would love just to have some group conversation around any aha moments or something that you feel like your group agreed on and was important, or something left open to agree on.
I'll go first, Carrie. So we had a really good group discussion, lively discussion. It's nice to, see old friends in the group and new folks as well. So Bob joined us from Premier Compaction Systems. So we were able to talk a little bit more about the employer perspective in terms of, getting to that pieces about the fragmentation in terms of how does Bob more connect with folks like us at some of us at community-based organizations? What are some of the challenges at the city level in terms of making those connections? And then we were talking a lot about our social media and marketing. Those things really resonated with us at the end of our conversation.
Great, thank you, Kathleen. Others? Aha moments, things you might need to agree on, things you did agree on. And then a really important question in setting targets is there data needs related to that setting like a hard goal?
Yeah, I'll jump in. We didn't talk so much about data, but most of the people in our group were workforce folks versus employers. So we talked a bit about, what does it take to be successful, and, what workforce folks think about, which is, transitional roles and building stackable skills and all of that. But then how do you match or address the realities of barriers of employment and the need for retention strategies and wraparound services in concert with what an employer is going to need for successful engagement with folks going forward. So we talked a little bit about what that might look like, and the idea of maybe scaling to have a way to have intentional, strong employer partnerships so that you can address all of those different pieces for a longer term path.
That's great. Thanks, Tanya. And in the third room. I don't want to voluntold, but would love to hear about your conversation as well.
I'm happy to go unless somebody else from the third room wants to go. All right, I feel like we ended up with more questions than answers. Lots of conversation about like how much knowledge you need to have, you know, kind of before you start advocating, clear understandings of like where the money flows from, how the money flows. And then, you know, are we advocating for investments in human capital? Are we advocating for investments in infrastructure that will support human capital? And it's telling me my internet's unstable. So can you all still hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
Oh, perfect. Okay. I don't know why it's telling me that then. So really, I mean, we really were talking about kind of how do we make sure we do this in a thoughtful, strategic way that we are all aligned. And it felt like it was more, there were some preliminary steps about defining, you know, strategizing before we advocate, defining what investments we're talking about before we, you know, determine the investments. And then we were starting to get into just at the very end, like even at a local, state, and federal level, are we advocating around legislation changes or just funding investments? And so it raised lots of questions and definitely for me felt like this is like a working group that needs to happen, and it's lots of robust and interesting conversation would come out of it that would align us. And one of the things we ended up talking about is like, how can we kind of foresee what's coming down the pipeline, and then instead of being reactive, being proactive.
Okay, that's really helpful. And I'm going to ask everyone before you hop off, if you could put in the chat, and we'll follow up with a feedback form for a couple things. We do, opting in to work on working groups and continue working on these goals and drivers. And there's the folks who will help with the wordsmithing and getting the goal right, and then the building of the strategy. So if each person could put in the chat, if coming out of that breakout conversation made it clear to you that there's a working group, and it could be one that was already reflected back to you, but just put in the chat, like, what's the working group that is needed to accomplish the goal that you talked about, or some other goal that came up in your conversation, not necessarily the one that was on your form. If everyone could just put some ideas in the chat. Otherwise, we'll share back to you in the feedback form the working groups that were already raised in the survey and that you gave feedback on, and we're going to send them back to you for you to opt in. All right. Oh, thanks, Gaspar. Good. So the chat's open. Just quickly, Amanda on my team, if you could share the registration for July before folks sign off. I just want to flag for everyone, our meetings have been the first Thursday of the month. For July, it will be the second Thursday because the first Thursday is the 1st, and we just had some scheduling conflicts. So if you could reserve on your calendars July 8th from 10 to 11:30, that will be the next meeting. There'll be the other action steps will follow up in email. Sorry, I didn't get that finished there. But we'll send a feedback form for you to fill in and ask you to register for the next meeting. And then over the next few months, our agenda includes confirming the work groups, opting in, like I just said, defining our mission, targets, and goals that we've been working on, identifying and developing the service structure, and that goes back to the partnership models. And that partnership model presentation was to really think about, like, how are we accomplishing goals? What kind of model of a partnership is needed to do that? And to identifying partners, lead partners, we will design and finalize some sort of membership partnership agreement, draft a logic model, and set up those governance structures. So that's our agenda over the next few meetings. And thank you to folks who gave some feedback in the chat around working groups. That's really helpful. We'll incorporate that with information that you've already given to us. And I'm a minute past the time I have reserved with you, so I will bid you adieu, wish you a really good Thursday and rest of your week. Thanks for being a part of this.